My name is Charles Harrell. I'm a volunteer with the Veterans History Project. Today I'm in Bunker Hill, West Virginia, interviewing Mr. Charles Brown, who was in the military during World War II. Today is October 18th, 2008. Mr. Brown, for the record, would you state your full name?
Charles Henry Brown.
And what is your current address?
627 Montmorency Avenue, Bunker Hill, West Virginia, 25413.
Mr. Brown, where were you born?
Kitzmiller, Maryland.
And when were you born?
3rd of June, 1924.
During World War II, what branch of service were you in?
I was in the Army Air Force.
Were you enlisted?
I enlisted, yes.
And when did you enlist?
28th day of August, 1942.
But you were not called for active duty until when?
Not till the 3rd of March, 1943.
You served during the war and was finally discharged when?
October 25th, 1945.
And you stayed outside the service?
For 1 year, just a little less than a year.
And then you went back in on October 3rd, 46?
1946, yes.
And you stayed there for a career, true?
I sure did.
And when did they finally discharge you then, or retire?
1st of April, 1974.
During World War II, what was your highest rank?
Staff Sergeant.
But overall, when you finally retired?
I retired as Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force.
During World War II, can you tell me the group or the company you served with?
I was in the 331st Bomb Squadron, 94th Bomb Group, 8th Air Force.
Do you remember the primary base where you were flying out of?
Rougham, Rougham, England.
Is that where you flew out of on your last mission?
Yes, it was.
Your primary theater of operation was ETO.
That's right.
But after you went back in, you were in other places too.
Oh yeah, I was all over the place. I was in Hawaii, Greenland, Alaska, Kwajalein, Bowling Air Force Base, and Andrews Air Force Base, and Wordsmith, Michigan. Let's see.
So a variety of different places.
Yeah,
during World War II, what was your primary duty?
As a top turret gunner on B-17 aircraft.
And you were also the armorer?
Yes.
Were you ever a prisoner of war?
Yeah. Yes.
When did that happen?
I was captured the 7th of August, 1944.
And they sent you to a Stalag?
Stalag Luft 4.
And where did this occur?
In the North Sea.
North Sea. Were you injured when you were shot? Your plane went down?
No.
Before we get into your wartime exploits, Mr. Brown, I'd like to talk a little bit about who you are and how you grew up. I'd like for you to think back to your earliest memories, maybe before the Depression or maybe just at the beginning of the Great Depression. Tell me about your family.
Well, my father was a coal miner.
What was his name?
John Brown. And my mother, she passed away when I was 9. And I vaguely remember getting flour from the Red Cross during the Depression. And of course, lived in a little town, and everybody in the town had a garden in the yard somewhere, and they grew tomatoes and beans and stuff, and they canned them for the winter use.
This was at Kitzmiller?
At Kitzmiller, yes. And I had 7 years of grammar school, and at that time Maryland only had 11 years of so I had 11 years of high school, and I did graduate from high school in 1941.
Before the war.
Before the war. And during the summer after my junior year in high school, the Army used to have a thing called Citizens Military Training Camp. And you went to Fort Meade for 30 days training for each year for 4 years, and if you made it out all right, then you would receive a commission as a second lieutenant in the Army Reserves. And I think 3 or 4 of us decided, that would be something to do for the summer. So we signed up to go.
This is after you graduated, though.
After I graduated. No, this was my junior year.
Oh, okay.
We were at Fort Meade in this training camp when they drew the numbers out of the ball to who's going to get drafted first. And they stopped that right there, so I never did get to go anymore to this thing, because a couple years later I was in the service myself. And that, in essence, was my basic training for the Army. Because when I went in the service, I signed up for Aviation Cadets program, and I took the test, and I passed the written test plus the flight physical. But I didn't do too good in the test that I was given when I got there, so I was washed out of cadet program. But everybody that flunked out of the cadet program, they were mostly all could pass the physical. So we were to become gunners, aerial gunners.
Before we get into that, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the Great Depression. You said you remember flour being given out by government.
Red Cross flour.
Did your dad lose his job?
No, but he no more coal than they sold. He might as well. One thing I remember, we rented a house, and the rent was $8 a month. But in the summertime, coal miners in those days had hardly work at all. So he paid his $8 off tending the owner's garden and cutting this grass and then going out and pick berries to can. And I went to the company store many a time to pick up my father's paycheck, and all I had on there was he owed $2 or $3. He wouldn't even get a nickel, but somehow or another we survived.
Did you get involved with any governmental programs such as CCC or WPA?
No, my father was on the WPA.
What did he do?
They worked on the streets and stuff in town, and but my brother was in the CCs. And but by the time I got out of school, the war was just about ready to start, so they canceled that program. And they did have a CC camp about 8 miles from our hometown, but I never got in it because I was still in school.
Did you have electric power in the houses that you'll rent?
Oh yeah. If I remember right, I think we got it about 1930, because I started school in 1930, and I can remember my brother coming home early from school before I went to started, because it got too dark. They couldn't see it in the schoolhouse. So, but we had school with electricity all the time.
What were you good at school? What did you enjoy?
One thing I liked the best was to read. One class, I forget what it was in, the teacher would read a book, in slack time. And if I got ahead and completed what I was supposed to do, I'd always go up and ask her if I could read that book. So every time she read the book, I was listening to her, because I had I stayed ahead of her reading, but I enjoyed that. But
Do you have a favorite teacher that sticks in your mind?
yeah, my first and second grade teacher. We had a lady back in our hometown. She's still living, in fact, 90 some years old, but she taught the first grade, and she taught most of the kids in town. And it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I talked to her, and her name was Dixie. We called her Miss Dixie. And I said, "Do you know you didn't teach me in the first grade?" And she said, "Yes, I do, Charles." She said, "When you started school, we had too many people in the class, so we split them up between her and a second grade teacher. So instead of going to her for the first grade, I went to a second grade teacher for first and second year, and I really liked her, but then and had the same teacher, third and fourth grade, same teacher, fifth and sixth grade, and then the seventh grade, we just had the one teacher. But I went to high school. We had 4 years of high school up there, and I wouldn't say I tore any of them up too bad, but when I was in grammar school, I could make good grades.
But you sure did like that reading.
Oh yeah, I still like to read. I got books and
As you grew up, were you an outdoor type of kid?
I guess somewhat. And one of the things I remember in 1940, that was one of the best summers I ever spent. They have a big lake up in Garrett County for power plants, And me and 2 other boys, we got a tent and we went out over and camped on the lake for a week. And, I really enjoyed that. And of course we ran all over the place when we was kids. We swam in the Potomac River, and where I lived was about as far from here across the street to West Virginia. So we spent as much time in West Virginia as we did in Maryland.
Who was your best friend growing up?
Well, it was a boy named Harrell Shore. And he ended up to be a B-25 pilot during World War II. And he went on to become an aeronautical engineer for the Boeing helicopter country. And one day, I came home from the golf course, and my wife said my brother had called, and my usual response was, "What did he want?" But she said that Harold Shore had had a stroke. He lived in Philadelphia. So we used to have a reunion for anybody that went to school. We didn't go by class. If you went to school, you could go every year to your reunion. And I talked to his brother-in-law one time down at the golf course down in Virginia. And I said, "How's he getting along?" He said, "I visited him in the hospital, and I never thought he'd come out of there. But he said he is going to the reunion up at Kidsmiller. In I guess it was in August or July, I forget. But anyway, it was our 50th. This was in 1991. So I told Helen, I said, I hadn't been going, I just got tired of it. So I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go to see Harold Shore. So we went to the reunion, and he met me in the middle of the floor, and he just, he talked natural and everything. And we sat down, and he told me, he said, I know everybody, I know everything is going on, but I have a problem at times getting it out of my tongue. And his wife had passed away, and the neighbor husband had passed away, and the families were close and everything. So this lady, his next door neighbor, brought him down here from Philadelphia to the reunion. And she she told my wife that he no longer could read and write. And as far as I was concerned, he was the smartest kid that ever graduated from that high school. And that depressed me so bad, I said, let's go. We left and went home. And about a couple months, 2 or 3 months later, we got a call he'd passed away.
But you had good time as a young
he was the smartest. You don't go back that far, but you used to get model airplanes with balsa sticks and stuff, and you put them and you glued them together. I never could get one of them things to work, but he put one together in about 20 minutes. And then you put paper on it as a skin. He used to make them, and he had a little shed in the backyard. We used to go out in the shed and crawl up there, and you wind it up with a rubber band. He'd wind it up, light a match to it, and throw it out, and so it got down in flames. But he turned out to be a pilot. He was a lot smarter than me. My thought was I wanted to fly, but I did get to fly, but I didn't get to drive the airplane.
As the war heats up in Europe, and we're not involved yet, did you know as a high school student about that we were going to get involved?
Well, even at that age, you could feel it, you know. We as kids, and we was too busy doing other stuff. One thing I remember the most was that when that war started, we had a lot of rain, you know, and we had a real bad rainy season, and all you heard was them guns over in Europe was doing that. People thought the firing them guns was making it weren't rain over here, but just like everybody blamed the atomic bomb on it. But we kind of knew it. Well, it wasn't obvious at the time, but the CCC camp was put on there to help kids get money. But the basics behind that was get American young men familiar with living in barracks and taking orders and going to war. Most of the people that controlled the CCC camps, they were Reserve Army officers. And I think that's pretty much so all over the United States.
Well, you graduated in 1941 in June,
right,
or so, and you know the draft was just beginning. Where was your number? Do you remember?
Oh, I didn't get no number. No, I was too young then.
Okay.
Now, my wife's brother, he was drafted one of the first, and he got his year in before the war started. But wasn't shortly thereafter he was back in again. So, but I didn't. I signed up for the draft in 42. I was out of high school. I become 18. I graduated from school at 17.
When Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 41, had you ever heard about Pearl Harbor before?
Not really. I hadn't. Actually, I didn't have any idea where it was.
When you first heard the news, do you recall where you heard the news and how you heard it?
I was in Baltimore, Maryland, working at the Glen L. Martin Aircraft Factory. And the thought was we'll whip them over, you know, by starting in the morning we'll have them whipped by noon, but somebody had the wrong idea. It didn't take that short period of time. And that was another thing that was amazing. The war started on Sunday, and when we went to work Monday, that airplane looked like it was Fort Knox. There's security all over the place.
What did you do? Well, first of all, was that your first real job?
Yep.
At that plant, what did you do? What was your job?
I was doing a little like sheet metal work, for forming little parts for the airplane. And I was getting paid 50 cents an hour.
Had you been a traveler before this time? Had you gone places?
Yeah, the Cumberland, about 40 miles away.
But that's
another thing. when we signed up to go to the CMTC, we had a Western Maryland Railroad went through the town we lived in. It mainly was hauling coal. But the eastbound train left there at 20 minutes to 11. So we got on the eastbound train going to Baltimore. We got there sometime after 6 o'clock. And I just couldn't believe the United States of America was that big. I mean, we rode that train almost a whole day just to get to Baltimore. And you can drive it, now you can probably drive it in 3 hours. But we sat on that train and looked, they stopped every 15 mile, I think. But
The Great Depression, there were a lot of hobos riding the trains.
yeah,
Did you see that?
I vaguely remember one coming by our house, and my mother gave him something to eat. And we wasn't overly loaded with food, but she fed this man. I remember that when I was little, and but I heard about him. And
Did you ever hop a train when you were young?
hell no, I ain't jumping on. That's two things I won't jump. I won't jump on a train, and I won't jump out of an airplane. So I remember one guy that the railroad track was right along the Potomac River, and there was a bank down there. And this guy, the train was going slow because it was going upward, He jumped off of there. Of course, when he hit the ground, he was running, and he run down that bank, and he was halfway across the river before it wasn't very high. He was halfway across the river before he could stop. We just stood on the other side and laughed. But I never tried that stuff. No way.
The war starts for us by the Japanese bombing us.
Right.
Before they bombed us, did you have any clue they were angry at us of any sort?
Not really. I can remember. We did have movies then, and I seen movies of bombing Shanghai, and then I saw movies of bombing in Spain. But young, you said that ain't gonna happen over here. And it's a long way over here.
There was a lot of hatred toward the Japanese at first during the war.
Yeah.
Do you recall how you felt?
Not particularly, because there wasn't any Japanese around where we lived, and I probably hadn't even seen one yet.
During the Great Depression and World War II, you lived in Maryland.
Right.
There was segregation in Maryland and Virginia. And did you have much connection with black people in your neighborhood?
I don't think there wasn't any blacks in Garrett County during when I grew up and after, and I'm not too sure that there's any there now. I never seen a black person until I got about 8 or 9 years old, and I saw him, and they had him in Cumberland, but they never had him in Garrett County.
So you didn't see racism?
No, we wasn't in that.
The war's begun, and Hitler is saying he wants to kill the Jews and all this stuff. Do you even recognize what he stood for during the war?
Well, the only thing I remember is we knew about that. We knew that they were gassing the Jewish people. It wasn't no world secret. And when we were in a POW camp, they said, we're going to give you fellas a shower. So they marched us out of the camp up to where the German guards and all lived, and we went in the shower to get a shower. Don't you think we wasn't wondering what the hell was going to come out of them pipes up there? But it was water. But we had heard about this in England, about how they gassed them, but that was one of the scariest situations I got into.
Well, let's talk now about your military career. Where did you sign up to enlist?
The first time? Cumberland, Maryland.
Did you go with any friends?
No. I went up to high school on the 27th, and we took the cadet test. And there was 90 people. 90 people took the test, and 45 of them passed. And they told the 45 that passed to be at the Armory, National Guard Armory, at time the next day, and they give us a physical. And that afternoon they lined us up and raised their hand, and we were sworn into the Army Reserve.
And you hoped when you joined up that you'd become a pilot?
Oh yeah, I did.
Any particular type of pilot, bomber, fighter?
I didn't care, just
to fly.
As long as I could be a pilot, but I never did get to be one.
Tell me, what happened that you were washed out of the program?
Well, I remember one particular time this instructor's giving us a written test, and he said, they put the test paper on your desk, and they said, you lay your pencil down there beside, and when I say start, start, and when I say stop, stop. And sometimes it things like he said stop before he said start. And one other thing I remember was there was a map of the Far East, and all the countries had a number in there. For instance, it was French Indochina was fine. I remember that much. But say they had number 3 in there. Okay, you were supposed to line up number 3 with Indochina. And hell, I never even heard of some of them countries because we didn't have a TV like these kids now. Hell, they know everything. But we had radios, but half the time you didn't get none until midnight. And really, that's a phony alibi, but I really wasn't familiar with that part of the world.
So a series of tests is probably
yeah,
what's
and then I guess we had, like, we pulled ropes for, and then you look in there and see how close they were together. Now, what they call that, I forget, but anyway, I wasn't no good at that either. One time I stopped at my brother's house, and when I come out to leave, he looked at the car and he said, "You park that car, or did you get out and leave it?" I about that much from the curb, but I knew that I didn't do too good in that. So,
but you really wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah, I wanted to be a pilot, but then I had no. A lot of guys complained that when they worked out of cadets, they was going to be gunners, but I didn't. I wanted to fly somewhere or another. So,
well, you met at the Cumberland Armory, enlisted there, took some tests. Where did they send you?
Well, I went in the reserves then.
Okay.
Till March.
What did you do during that time?
I was working at the Selney's company in Cumberland.
What were you doing there?
Oh, we were making some kind of artificial rayon for parachutes.
Did you know anybody there? Did you have friends?
Oh yeah, there's people from my hometown and everything. Yeah, I had a lot of friends. Matter of fact, I left there in 43 to go into service, and my brother passed away in 1992. And they put his obituary in the Cumberland paper, and about 2 or 3 days after that, the doorbell rang, and I went to the door, and the guy said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "No, maybe if you take off them dumb sunglasses, I might recognize you." And I still didn't. And I can remember his first name was Donald, but he said, "I worked with you at the Selney's," and I hadn't seen him. From 1943 to 1992, I never laid eyes on that guy. But when he saw my name in there, he came You come down there and look me up.
I've interviewed a fair number of folks that worked at that plant about the same time.
Yeah, it's 1940, 41, and that, no, 41, because I was in school in 40.
Another guy named Paul Kleitz, who's found me a lot of veterans to interview. Kleitz. He worked there before he went in.
Wasn't C-L-I-S-E, wasn't it?
No, C-L-I-T-S.
Okay, well, the guy I'm talking about, he was a boss where I worked, and his name was Kleitz. But this guy, he saw my name in his obituary. He come to see me. Fortunately, I never went back to see him. He lived up in Luna County next to Cumberland.
Well, you worked at Celanese for a bit, and then you were called back up in March of '43. Where'd they send you?
March of '42, I went to Baltimore
No, March '43.
43. I went to Baltimore and signed at the recruiting office and signed in.
What happened there?
Well, we got on a train and went to Nashville, Tennessee.
Why Nashville?
That was a classification center for a cadet program.
What did you do there?
Well, we took the tests and calisthenics and so on, and become halfway members of the military service. But then after I washed out, they sent me to St. Petersburg, Florida for basic training.
Now, my dad was in a cadet program too, and he washed out. He told me that cadets were lower than anybody else, even privates. Is that your experience?
No.
No?
No. As a matter of fact, most of them thought they were, well, that may be other people, but most of them thought they were better than everybody else, because I remember when I went to gunnery school in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we got a 6-hour pass in town. This was after 3 or 4 other places before I got there. But I was prone to, growing up in the hills, had alcohol every once in a while. But I had quite a bit of alcohol when we first trip into town for a long time, and they had 6x trucks to haul us back to the base. And I got in there and I sat down in a truck, and there's about 3 or 4 more guys got in a truck, and they were aviation cadets. The cadets that were going to be bombardiers and navigators, they had to go to gunnery school, just like, because they was gunners also. But one of them said to me, he said, you can't ride on this truck, this is for cadets. I said, this is a GI truck, and I'm a GI truck. I'm a GI, and I'm riding this damn truck. So I rode the truck back to the base.
How was boot for you, boot camp?
Boot camp, I was only there 17 days, and most of the time we were taking some kind of test to see what we were going to be, Elmers or, they said you can either be an armor gunner, a mechanic gunner, or a radio operator gunner. Well, I watched my brother leave Cumberland in June or July of 1942, and he went directly to the canal. He joined the Marine Corps, and he did a 3-year tour in the Army in Hawaii, and he was a radio operator. So I said, I think I'll be a radio operator like my brother. He was my bigger brother, you know. And so we went back down after they took the test and graded them everything, and the guy said, what do you want to be, a mechanic gunner or an armor gunner? And I said, what happened to the radio operator? He said, you even missed the free question. So that's probably part of why I didn't get to be a pilot, you know. But anyway, I picked armament. And I got to St. Pete on the 7th of April, and I left on the 24th. And I went from there to Buckley Field, Colorado, right outside of Denver.
Now that was a ride way out there.
Oh man, all over the place.
What happened at Buckley Field?
Well, I had the first phase of armament school. And then after the first phase, we went over to Lowry Air Force Base, which is the big base. This was just a temporary one. And I finished, I think I finished up there in June. But for some reason, the rest of my class went off to gunnery school. But I forgot, I had something there. They said my ear was crooked or something, and it had to do with flight physical. And I got hung up there, and I didn't leave there till September.
From Lowry?
From June to, yeah. And from there I went to Las Vegas to gunnery school.
And this is in 1943.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. When you got to gunnery school, had you fired a big 50 caliber machine gun before?
No, hell no.
Had you fired any gun?
I fired a 30-06 at the CMTC, but that's the biggest thing I ever shot. But we had, I think, 6 weeks of gunnery school, and we had to disassemble it, field strip it, blindfolded. And I know a lot of them guys cheated because of a piece that hit the floor, and they just reach down and pick it up. If you're blindfolded, you can't do that unless you're peeking. And then we also had aircraft recognition. We'd go to the theater and they'd flash a picture of a German, British airplane, American airplane, and it'd be up there 1/100th of a second. You had to identify it. Yeah, I did pretty good at that. Matter of fact, I was a PFC then, and we went from there up to Yucca Flats, and that's where they had a lot of, they detonated some bombs up in there. But that was the first part of our flying. We flew the first time up there rather than down. But anyway, this tech sergeant was in a tent. We was in tents then, and I ended up with him because of alphabetical. And so he had flunked this test. And he told me, he said he flunked out of cadets. And if he flunked out of gunnery school, we'd be in trouble. And he said, "You did pretty good on that." And I said, "Yeah." So he said, "How about taking this test for me?" I said, "Okay." So I put his tech sergeant jacket on with all them stripes and everything, and I went up and I took the test. We had 25 airplanes flashed up. And this young kid was an instructor, and you got 4 points for every one you made. So he gave me a 96, and there was a cadet there. I think this was an officer even that was going to gunnery school for being that. And he gave him 100. And I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "That wasn't no P-51, that was a Spitfire." And that kid said, "No, it was." And I said, "Get the damn slides out." So he got it out, and it was a Spitfire, it wasn't no P-51. So instead of getting 96, I got 100. So I went back down to the tent. And this tech sergeant said, "Did you pass?" I said, "Sure, I passed." He said, "What kind of score you make?" I said, "I made 100. He said, "You shouldn't have done that." They know I flunked once, they didn't know. But anyway, he got to continue on.
Do you think today you would still recognize those airplanes?
Pretty much. I don't think I could recognize them that fast, but...
At Yucca Flats, did you shoot... You mentioned you went there by airplane.
No, we went up there on a... no, we didn't fly up there. We went up there on a train or something.
Okay.
But...
how was your first flying experience?
Fantastic.
It was here in the States, right?
Yeah, it was in Yucca Flats. Well, the day before we were supposed to fly, and it was too much wind. You know, it was windy. And the pilot took us back, and we were sitting in the waist, and he was talking about the airplane, and that wind was blowing, that thing was shaking and making all kind of racket. And I don't know if I want to go up in the air in this damn thing or not. But the next morning, we took off, and it's really flat out there. And I was sitting right up in the nose. And I had no sensation of any forward movement. It just felt like we were sitting there. It's flat country now, and we were just rising up. But we were going out like that. And it was fascinating.
And you were in B-17 at this time?
Yeah, up in the nose of it, yeah. And that's the first airplane I was ever flew in.
Did you get instructions on what to do if there was a engine failure or you had to bail out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were told that. We never did jump for practice. They said if you don't do it right the first time, you ain't get no second time.
How many times would you suspect you flew before you went overseas?
Oh, I had, we had about 125 hours in combat crew training, and in Dalhart, Texas. But but that's the first gunnery we did at Yucca Flats. We fired 50 calibers and 30 calibers at targets towed by another airplane.
So you were in an airplane?
Oh yeah, I was in a B-17 shooting at a target pulled by a T-6.
When you first shot at the target with your machine gun, could you tell you hit it?
I couldn't tell. The way that they told how do you hit it, they give everybody a color. Say I was blue. So they painted the tips of the bullet for blue for me and orange for somebody. And when the bullet heated up going out of the barrel and it hit that cloth, it left paint on there. So they could tell by the blue holes in the target how much you put in there. I apparently put enough in there that I got to finish gunnery school. But
after gunnery school, where did they send you?
We got a 14-day land route, and I went back to Kitzmiller. Then I come back to Salt Lake City, Utah, and that's where they formed the crews.
You had not met your pilot by this time?
No, I didn't meet him until I got down to Texas.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, he wasn't the first pilot we had. But we left Salt Lake City and we went to Dalhart, Texas, which is up in the Panhandle. And we stayed there 3 months for combat training.
What did they take you through in combat training?
Well, we flew missions, and we flew. We were supposed to fly a 500-mile or something trip, for getting used to being navigating. We never left Texas. We flew over from Dalhart to Texarkana and back, and that was enough to take care of it.
When you flew those missions, did you also learn how to set the bombs so that they'd be dropped?
Well, we did. We dropped practice bombs. It was 100 pounds of sand in there with a spotter in the back. We dropped those on the bomb range, and then we fired the guns and everything, and got used to being in the air. And I remember one time, man, and we had, you seen that picture on the cover, that was the leather, that's what we started wearing. And you had a jacket and a pair of pants. We were flying one day and it was so cold I couldn't even bend over to put them pants on. I kept hitting the pilot on the shoulder, pointing down, but we were about 21,000 feet, and it was really cold. But he kept us up there. But when I was flying, I was continually from one end of the airplane to the other. I just run back there and up in front and back and forth, and I never did spend a lot of time in a turret, in the States.
As your training came to an end, did you go anywhere besides Dalhart, Texas after that?
We left Dalhart, Texas on a train to Kearney, Nebraska.
What happened in Kearney?
Well, we were assigned an airplane to fly to Europe.
So you're going to fly to Europe, not take a boat?
We were. We loaded all our gear on the airplane and ready. We was going to take off the next morning, headed for Europe. And it came down with a change or something. The airplane was grounded. So we got on a train and clear across the United States to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey.
What happened there?
Well, we stayed there a few days and they put us on a train and took us over to New York and put us on an English ship.
You remember the name?
Mauritania. I can't spell it, but I can show you a picture of it somewhere. That was a sister ship to the Lusitania that the Germans sunk and got us in World War I.
And you used that ship to get across the ocean. How was ocean travel for you?
Well, we weren't in a convoy. We went over in 7 days. And the reason that we could do that, they had it figured out that a submarine took X number of minutes to set up a firing pattern, to get to there. So, say it was 30 minutes for them to set it up. Every 28 minutes, they changed course. We zigzagged across the ocean, and we made it in 7 days. And Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mary, they would make it in 5 days. Then they went alone. They never did no convoy. And we had they marched us on the ship. Some second lieutenant took us all through, leading us all the place, and we came out in a mess hall, tables, and everything. And somebody said, "Lieutenant, we ain't hungry." This was right about midnight. So we're tired. He said, "Just pick you out of space and flop her down." And that's where we slept on the deck all the way to England.
Was it cold?
No, it wasn't cold. But and then they had 2 meals a day, and we had to help. We got to eat first, but we had to help prepare, set up the second meal. Man, you couldn't find your gas mask and and your helmet. And I think half the people when we come off there, they issued us a 45 in Kearney, and I think half the people had somebody else's weapon. But we landed at Liverpool.
Did you get sick?
No.
When you got to Liverpool, were you already with the crew you were going to fly the rest of your missions with?
Oh yeah, we was crew together in Dalhart. Mm-hmm. We were formed a crew there, and we stayed. We stayed together until we went down, And then actually, when we went down, and we were picked up. The officers went to one camp, and the enlisted people went to another.
Now you said your dad was English.
No, my mother was English.
Your mother was English.
Yeah.
Here you are in England now.
Yeah, we got to England.
Did you have any relatives that you were told to look for, or did you not communicate much?
I was told the name of the town that my mother was born in, and it was New Bigham by the sea. Never could find out where it was. So in 1995, we went back to England with the bomb group people that was in the same bomb group I was in. never could find out where it was. But I had an aunt that kept track of my grandmother, my mother and father, and her daughter kept them. She passed away, but anyway, she gave me a telephone number of two relatives. One was on my grandfather's side and one on my mother's side. And I called both of them, and I got in touch with them. And I told Helen, I said, we're over here. We should go see those people. But the trains were on a slow down. They weren't on a strike. They were everybody. And I bought a map. I said, we're in a car. And she said, Deed, you're not driving no car in this place on the wrong side of the road. But I opened up this map, and the first place I saw was New Biggin by the sea. And it was that far from the English part, and it was in Scotland. No, it was that far from Scotland, but it was in the English part. And but that's the first time I ever found out where she lived, and in 2 trips over there.
You're in England at Liverpool. You just got off the boat. Where'd they send you?
They sent us to can't remember, but we was at a place where they brought us a whole bunch in there, and then they left crew by crew. And we were one of the last ones to leave. But where in the hell was I? I didn't think I'd ever forget that. But we went from there to Bovington, which was down near London. And that's where we were assigned to a bomb group. And the pilots got to look into the records of individual bomb groups, and they got pretty much leeway to select one. So our pilots select this, and it had a very low loss rate. And when we got there, he's the first one to be among the missing in several months, But when we left Bovington, the officers went on to the bomb group, and we had to go to a place called the Warsh for some refreshing on gunnery school. We shot some guns and stuff, and we were up there for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then we finally went to the bomb group.
And where were they stationed?
Where were we stationed in?
Yeah.
Rougham, Rougham, England.
Before we get into you flying combat missions, can you tell me the people in your squad, not your squad, in your plane, and who they were, and what's strange about them, or what's interesting to note about each man?
Well, the pilot's name was Spence, S-P-E-N-S-T, and he was from Denver, Colorado. And he was such a guy that all the other crews, we were in a barracks with 6 enlisted crews, and all the other guys liked him. Some of them better than they did their own pilot, but he was a damn good pilot too. And the co-pilot was from Springfield, Illinois, and he was a nice guy. That's a nice bunch of people we flew with.
Everybody was nice.
And
what was the co-pilot's name?
Metzroth, M-E-T-Z-R-O-T-H. And the bombardier was named Ira Dodd, and he was from Columbus, Ohio.
And these were all officers?
This is all the officers. And then the navigator, he was from Youngstown, Ohio. And I don't know if the whole world needs to know this, but his name was Pasek, P-A-C-E-K. So after the war, when I got in touch with the Bomb Group Association, I I found everybody's name but his. And then I saw a name there, P-A-C-K, in Youngstown, Ohio. I said, I bet that's a dude. He changed his name. So I got a hold of his phone number, and I called, and his wife answered. And I said, the reason I'm calling, I said, I think I may have flown during World War II with your husband. And I said, my name's Charlie Brown. So she said, Ed, did you fly with a guy named Charlie Brown during the war? Oh, yeah. He changed his name from Patrick to Pike, and he ended up living in Poland, Ohio. But we, after the war, I saw every one of them. We are, see, that was the 4 officers, and the flight engineer, the mechanic, his name was Dale Hurd, and he was from Indiana, some city, I don't, but, and then the assistant engineer, his name was Norman Workman, and he was from Salt Lake City. And of course I had listed my name as Cumberland because that's where I enlisted at. And the ball turret gunner was named Thies, and he was from Long Island. We used to get him about Long Island in a metal barrel. And radio operator was named Crosman. He was from Maine. And the tail gunner's name was Trilling, and he was from Wisconsin. And when we went down, we ditched in the North Sea, ditched the airplane, and tail gunner drowned. So we lost one crew member there. And Norman Workman, they cut the crew down to 9, and they took him off our crew about, I think, he didn't miss but one mission or so, but he was no longer on our crew. So after I got home, I ran into a guy down the golf course who had been in the 94th, and they sent me some information, and I contacted. I got to see about everybody. I went up to Long Island to go to school when I was in the Air Force up there, and I went to see Thies. And then we got assignment to Hawaii from Bowling Air Force Base field then, and we drove to San Francisco, and I stopped in Columbus, Ohio, and seen a bombardier, and I stopped in Illinois and seen a co-pilot. I stopped in Denver and seen the pilot, so I seen 3 of them going across country, and then I got a hold of I went down to Florida to see the engineer. He lived in St. Petersburg. Then he came up here, and we drove up to Maine to see the radio operator. And I got to see, but nobody could find Norman. The pilot was looking for him, and all of us were looking for him. And it was, I don't even think it was a year ago. I was sitting in this chair, and their phone rang, and I answered it. And this fellow says, "Is your name Charlie Brown?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You fly on B-17s during World War II?" I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "I'm Norman Workman's son-in-law." And I said, "I'll be damned." And his wife was in the hospital, or in the nursing home for what's that disease that people get they can't remember now? Alzheimer's. And he had dementia. And he had lived in Utah, but after the war he went down to California, to Los Angeles, and that's why we never could find him, you know. But
well, as a plane crew, did you when you were flying, did you joke around or was it real businesslike?
Well, it was. I don't know if you saw the Memphis Belle. That was a bunch of crap. They didn't get on the interstate and say I went to town last night and all that. We talked on the interphone when we had something personal, no, not personal, but we didn't yak off on that interphone. And we used the interphone, but
when you were on ground, did you go out together to bars? And
well,
places?
the three of us did. One guy, he wasn't much into the tail gunner for one, but the workmen and Dale, who were the engineers, and I, we always went to town together, and we was getting a pass to London every 2 weeks because we were a squadron lead crew.
What does that mean?
Well, we flew 18 airplanes. And we had 6 in the low flight, 6 in the high flight, the lead flight, 6 in the high flight, and 6 in the low. And he would be the leader of one of the 6 formation, But we got a pass a couple times. Well, maybe it was 3 weeks. A couple times they come so fast we didn't have enough money to go. We had to wait till payday till next time.
Did you see any USO shows while you were stationed overseas?
Not in England. Well, wait a minute. We did see one time. I can remember that girl playing the piano. But I never. It was too many people there. I wasn't the type to get in. We saw some they had some like in the States where we were, and I never did bother to go to them. Too much people. I didn't like it.
I'd like to talk to you about your first mission, combat mission overseas. You recall that mission?
Yeah.
How many missions total did you fly?
Well, actually I flew 22 and a half, but I took credit for 23 even though we didn't get back.
Tell me about your first mission.
Well, the first mission, we went to, can you stop that thing for a minute? I'll go get my...
We were talking about your first mission, a combat mission. You said you went to Belgium?
Liège, Belgium.
How did it feel to actually know you were going into combat zone?
Well, we were scheduled this is a little bit before, we were scheduled to fly, and they scrubbed the mission before we fly, and that I don't know, that went on 4 or 5 times, and not to say that we weren't scared. I'm speaking for myself. I was scared, but I knew we had to go, and I wanted to go and get it over with. You get out there all primed to go, and then they cancel it. But on this particular mission, we went to Liège, and the bomb bay doors, the electric system, something went whacked. So I had to stick my head out in the bomb bay and stick a crank in there. And I had to crank them doors open so they could drop the bombs. And then when they dropped the bombs, I got to crank them back shut. I wasn't too happy about that mission.
I see you have a list here. I'm just going to get a quick shot of this page. And I see your first mission was in May of '44.
Right, that's the first one.
And then 3 days later, another one?
Yeah.
And you kept going on 23 missions in a matter of 3 months.
Well, we was in the wing or in the bomb group 3 months and 3 days. So you got a mission here the 23rd, the 24th, 25th, 29th, and 30th, 31st of May. So I flew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 missions from the 20th of May till 31st of May.
So you're really flying all the time.
But we were scheduled to fly a mission before this in the 20th of May, and we used to, our group would take off and we'd form a formation, and then we'd form a formation with another group, and so we always formed in a formation over England, and then when we got the whole formation, maybe 1,000 airplanes set up, we went across the North Sea or the Channel to the target. Well, the first one we went on, or was going on, we were forming up in formation, and we're just getting ready to leave to depart England and head for the continent, and number one engine quit. So we aborted the mission and went back to base.
You had to pull out of your position?
Yeah, we pulled out of the formation and flew back and landed at the base with a full load of bombs on. And the bombs had a unit in the nose and in the tail, like a propeller. And when they dropped, that thing spun so long, and that armed the detonator. And when you took off, you had cotter pins in there. So once we got airborne and on the way, we would pull the cotter pins and arm the bombs. Well, we didn't go, and we wasn't going to salvo the bombs, so I had to go back and put the cotter pins back in. But anyway, this first mission was scheduled for Berlin, and we lost number one engine, and we went back to England. And on a third mission,
did you get a credit for that?
No,
first mission?
No.
Okay.
But on the third mission, we went to Berlin, and we made it back.
How did it feel like flying over the enemy's capital?
When they called it flak, we called it flak. When it went off, it put up a big black cloud in the sky. And when we got to Berlin, all I seen was black. And it was my first mission and a hard mission like that. And I started to pull my head down out of the turret. And I said, I got to see. And I looked and I seen black to the left and black to the right and black below us. And we was about 30,000 feet. And that was about the maximum B-17 that could really go. And that black was way above 30,000 feet. And I said, it looks like it's too wide to go around. It's too low to go under, and it's too damn high to go over. So we're going right through the middle of it. But we made that one.
Didn't get hit by any shrapnel?
No. We got hit. I don't think we got any hit that time.
Could you hear it also?
No, you didn't hear it. It was just like magic. You'd be looking out there, and all of a sudden, poof, there's a big black cloud out there. And that was a shell going off.
On that mission, did you see any German fighters?
No. I was there kind of late, and they had pretty well taken care of the Germans. But when we first got there, the fighters were P-38s and P-47s. And they didn't have the range to go, say, from England all the way to Berlin and back. So they would, the first few missions we went on, they would take us part way there, and then they'd have to turn back. And then you were on your own the rest of the mission with no cover. And then the new outfit would pick you up where that other one left off. But then they got to P-51, and it could make it all the way.
Was there any of your flights that you saw German fighters?
We saw one time.
Can you tell me what happened?
we were coming back from I think it was Munich, and we had a headwind. It seemed like I looked at one of them Alps, Pendle on the Alps. I looked at that same thing about 37 times. It just seemed like we weren't going nowhere, and the formation had just got loose. And man, all of a sudden, here come an airplane down out of the sun, right through the middle of the formation. Nobody fired around. In about 15 seconds, here come another. And everybody but me shot. And it was a P-47, the second one, chasing a German FW-190. And we were going this way, and they flew right in, and that formation looked like I had a drawstring on. Boy, everybody just pulled up together, and I turned the turret around to the back, and I seen that FW-190 go down. That 47 caught him, and he shot him down. But that's the only time we ever saw any fighters.
So you didn't have to shoot your guns during a war?
No, we didn't start in May of '44. They started bombing over there with the 8th Air Force in '42 sometime, and I know one time right before D-Day, we went on a mission to Germany, and we went like this, just round and round and round, and it was just a decoy, trying to pull the German fighters up, and then we had oodles of American fighters to knock them down and keep them away from the landing zone. But I don't think there's too many showed up there that day.
When you dropped your bombs, could you see them go off, or were they too far away?
No, they drop and we were going. By the time they hit the ground, we were. I don't know if the tail gunner might have seen them, but I didn't ever see any. That's one time that we went on a mission. Let's see, where was it? It was after D-Day. Which one was it here? Anyway, in the top turret, I couldn't really see too much of the country, and I didn't know I was going to get to walk over most of it. But so I wanted to see some of it. So I checked with the pilot, and I changed positions with the tail gunner. He went up in the turret, and I got back in the tail. And that was in France somewhere. But we got a close hit. I mean, flak was close. And I'm sitting back there in the tail, and I hear a boom. And there was an airplane right behind me. And I said, oh man, I done shot around into one of our own airplanes. And then I realized, I said, you dummy, you can't fire one round out of a machine gun. You touch that button, and there's no way one round it's going to be a bunch. So I looked down at the side of the fuselage, and there was a hole about that big around. The other side over here was one about that big around. And the pilot said, that was close. Did anybody get hit? And I said, I'm hit, but I'm all right. So after we cleared the target and everything, he come crawling back in the tail. And I took my glove off, and blood was running down around my wrist. But when he come down, and I took it off again, it was blood from here about to there. And that hole shrunk, and this one shrunk. But I got nicked on that's the only thing ever happened to me. I got nicked on my thumb there.
Did your plane ever get hit by a substantial piece of flak?
No, I think one time we got a couple flak holes in it. We were just fortunate. Just as lucky as you could be.
As you flew along your formation, flak is all around you. Did you personally see another plane get hit?
I saw one time, and he went straight down. I mean, he was headed right for the deck.
Of B-17.
B-17, and you know what? Looked up there, he was back in the formation. I don't know how he even got out of that damn dive, but he got back in the formation. The mission I was supposed to went on, where we lost the #1 engine, there was a picture in I bought a book about B-17 fortresses, you know. There was a picture in there of a bomb hitting a wing. The bomb dropped off, and this plane had shifted over, and it knocked the wing loose, and the whole crew went down. And that was a mission I was supposed to have been on, and that was one of our airplanes. You could see the square A insignal on the wing. But we were, other than the last mission, we were just a barrel of luck.
Can you tell me about the mission you flew on D-Day?
D-Day? Well, we weren't scheduled to fly, but we had went to bed, and it was about 11 o'clock, and they come in and woke us up, and they said breakfast at 12, briefing at 1
In the morning.
So we went up there, and the officers went to the real building. The enlisted men, we went to the armory and got our guns and assembled them all, because you know the barrel plate with the holes in it, that stayed on the airplane. You just put the guts in there.
Oh.
And you got the guts, and there's a thing there between the barrel and the thing. It was called headspace, and that was very critical, so your gun didn't freeze up. So we went and got our guns ready, and
so the guns themselves don't stay on the airplane all the time.
no, the guts of them off. That's all.
Oh.
So we went and got our guns ready, and we went down. We installed them, and then the pilots come out and said, "This is a big one." Said they're hitting the coast. They're bombing today, and they told us that nobody, if you went down in the channel, nobody would, no boats or nothing would stop going to the over to France. They might pick you up when you get back, but nothing stopped going to France. The ships and we had just like we're going to France, or from here to France, we had to go there and then come all the way around and come in the back end of England. We just couldn't turn around and come back, but we went all the way around. And it wouldn't take long to fly across the channel, but I think we pulled about 8-hour mission, and we took off pitch dark. I think we took off 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
By the time you were formed up over England and made your run,
we dropped bombs on where they were landing, you know, indoor, but about 15-20 minutes before the troops actually invaded.
And you bombed Caen, according to the book here.
Caen, yeah, and these other days, this is the Calais area. We bombed in the 2nd, the 3rd, 4th, and Caen was the 6th, which was D-Day.
Did you see the ships underneath you as you flew across?
You see this here, 6-3?
Mm-hmm.
That's my birthday. And that's the Calais area. And we bombed there, and we come back, and it was getting dark, you know. And we were flying back, and we seen flak, and I thought that was England. You know, we come back from there, and I was standing by the co-pilot, and I said, "Them damn Lammies are shooting at us." He said, "That's not." He said, "There's 2 islands in the channel, Gurney and the Jersey Islands, and the Germans have them, and they were shooting at us, but it was still late enough. When we got back to England, we flew over. I forget, but it was a port. You couldn't look without seeing 75 ships and that. But that was an invasion flying, and they took off 3 days later, 2 days later, whatever.
On D-Day, on the D-Day flight, you don't remember seeing the ships in the channel?
Not on the way over, no.
And because you made the big detour, you wouldn't have seen them.
We would be coming. It probably took you an hour to fly across there. Well, maybe say 2 hours over and back. We flew about 8 hours, I think, at least.
When you flew the mission on D-Day, the paratroopers were also dropping.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you see the C-747s or other ships that were coming in?
No.
Were you flying so high that you couldn't see the ground during those missions?
I don't remember seeing the ground because it was almost still dark when we bombed.
You flew day after, the week after the big storm?
We flew the next day. Oh, well, wait a minute. The next day, and then it was 5 days before we flew.
Because there was a big storm, right?
I don't remember.
Don't remember? Okay.
But these are. The next day was France. This was France. This is France. This is France. And this mission here, it says mission number 184. That was a supply mission to the French underground.
What were you dropping?
Guns and ammunition.
How did you, as armor, deal with that?
Well, it was just a combat mission to us, but we loaded these canisters on board the airplane just like a bomb, and we flew down the Southern Alps, and there was a big field up there, and they had 3 fires burning in a triangle, and that was the target area. We would drop they had guns, ammunition, and stuff, and the French would run out of the woods, grab one, and haul ass back in the woods faster to get. But that was the second one they made. I didn't go on the first one, but they got jumped with some German fighters down there. But when we went down there, you couldn't look anywhere without seeing a P-51. We didn't see no Germans, but.
As you did that mission, did you get lower to the?
Oh yeah, deck? Yeah. We flew close down there. You almost see the. They had chutes on them. You could almost see the chutes hitting the ground. But that was my next to last one.
Tell me, before we get to your last one, were there any other missions that you stick out in your mind?
No. I don't, not that I can remember.
You did these 22 missions, and you were dropping bombs because that's your job. Did it ever occur to you that your bombs were not only killing the enemy, but you were dropping it on civilians too?
No, not really.
Not really.
I figured. One guy told me one time after the war that I asked him question, and he said, I don't remember nothing. He said all the bad stuff we did, and my philosophy was they started it. We didn't bomb anybody. The Japanese bombed us, and then the Germans joined up with the Japanese. So
when you dropped the bombs from the B-17 for those 22 missions, were you always too high to see the damage?
Oh yeah. Well, I never seen any hit or anything. No, I never. I seen some of the damage later on in the war when I was a guest of the Luftwaffe.
Tell me about your last mission, mission 22 and a half or 23.
Well, it was what do they call it? Just a screw up. We were scheduled to fly a weather mission. When they had a mission, they sent a B-17 out to fly the area where they were going to form in formation, and radio checks back on the weather. So we were scheduled to fly a weather mission. Consequently, we didn't go to bed early because it was about an hour and a half, 2-hour mission, then you was back to the base. Well, we got up to operations, and lo and behold, we are not scheduled for a weather, we're scheduled for a combat mission to go to Berlin. And the tail gunner had complained. You want to turn that around? The tail gunner had complained to somebody about the fact that we hadn't been flying enough missions to get done and go home. And so we didn't go to bed like we're supposed to. But anyway, we took off on a formation, and we got to Berlin. And the lead airplane had just hit the initial point where you start the bomb run. And number 3 engine quit. Started pumping oil.
You could see this?
Oh yeah. I could see the oil coming out, and then I think maybe it might have been 4 engines. Number 4 hit first. And then 2 started on there, and my interphone wasn't working. When you're flying and something goes bad, everything goes bad. But my interphone wasn't working, and then I called on the interphone to the co-pilot to tell him number 1 engine was pumping oil. And I got down out of the turret and tapped him on the shoulder, and I held up 3 fingers, but I meant number 2. And then when I realized I made a mistake, I looked over, number 3 was pumping oil too. Number 4 had already stopped, quit. They feathered it. Number 4, I mean, and they got 3 feathered, but they couldn't get 2 feathered. And if you're without, if the engine ain't turning, feathered means flat. And but if it stops, they'll be flat. But if you feather, it's into the wind and cuts down the drag. And number 2, he couldn't get feathered. And I sure remember he was cussing that engine, and trying to fall off and everything, but it just froze, and the blade was there, so it got more drag. And he decided to, we had to jump. He blew the horn, the bell to go out, and I could see the ocean. And I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "Why don't we ditch this airplane?" Because I didn't want to jump out of the airplane anyway, and I couldn't see jumping out over the enemy capital. But later I found out that the German civilians would treat you roughly if they got a hold of you before the military did, and you couldn't blame them. If somebody blew up my damn house, I got him on the ground, I'd want to be mean to him too. But he said okay, so we started throwing stuff out. And what we had in mind was that the British Air Sea Rescue Service always talked that the talk was they'd almost come ashore to pick you up. But they didn't come get us. We went in to drink at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on Sunday afternoon. And Monday evening, we saw B-17 flying in toward where we thought Germany was, and we fired some flares. We had flares in the rafts. And he kept on going, he never even looked. And about 15, 20 minutes later, we saw another airplane. And we fired a flare, and here it come, right in our direction. And the bombardier, he he wasn't too good in aircraft recognition apparently, but he said, we're all right now. That's a British Mosquito. I said, that is not no Mosquito. That's a Ju-88. And when it got there, that's what it was. So he flew around, and they had what they call a trailing ball antenna. They had a big lead on it, and they let it out, and it had an antenna on it. And we could see that out. We knew he was calling somebody, and it wasn't too long here, a 3-engine seaplane showed up. And they landed and taxied up to us. And there was a guy sitting there with a burp gun aimed at us. So we paddled up to the pontoon, and when everybody got out of it, they stuck a knife in it and sunk it.
When you ditched, did your airplane go nose in?
No, it just hit and stopped, and the procedure was that you go out the top hatch, and when we hit the ground, I looked up and there was water in the radio room, and it was looks like about 17 guys trying to go out the top hatch, and the airplane was split. Fuselage was split all the way across the Bombay in there. So I just went out through that hole, and I had a defective Mae West, and I neglected to get a new one. But anyway, only half of it was working, and I inflated that half. That wasn't quite enough. I was scared, man. I mean, I talked to the man upstairs. I needed some help. Them guys come and got me and got me in a raft. We stayed out on the water for 28 hours sitting in a life raft.
Was it cold?
The only part about it was cold. It wasn't really that cold. But when you're bent over, trying to get some sleep, every time you get to sleep, a big old waft of cold water come up and go down the crack of your butt. And you never slept very long but it wasn't wasn't all that cold.
Hungry, cold, hungry or thirsty?
No, we never get. I don't think, I know I didn't. I was just, I don't know, maybe in a daze or something. But we sat there and rubber life rafts and.
You said life rafts in one?
No, it was some of them. I think we had one big one which held 5 people, and we were down to 8 people because they took the one guy off and the tailgun guy. So we had 5 and 3 individual dinghies, for one man. And we got them all tied together where we wouldn't get separated, But then they flew us into the Frisian Islands.
When they took you off the plane, off the boat, and put you in the flying boat, what did you think about?
I was thinking I was damn glad to get out of that rubber boat. But they had a guy. I don't know if you were familiar, but a burp gun is this semi-automatic weapon the Germans had, and the reason they called it a burp gun was when they pulled the trigger, went burp, and this German airman was aiming a burp gun at us, and we got inside the airplane. He was still pointing that thing at us, so he pointed as we got into Frisian, and it was a seaplane. And they had to, I forget how they did it, but they didn't have no wheels. So they pulled it up on a dolly. And when we got out, and there was somebody there to take all the pictures. And I guess, I don't know what the hell they did with them. And we spent the night there.
You were taken for interrogation.
We left there, and I didn't remember, but apparently we went from Frisian Islands over on a boat, because they were islands out there. And I never even thought about that, but apparently we did have a boat take us into, and they put us on a train. and we went to Frankfurt. And then Frankfurt, Germany, that's where the interrogation center was.
Well, here you are, a bomber flyer, and you're captured.
Yep.
A lot of people would look at you, as you already mentioned, civilians wouldn't like you at all, but military, how'd they treat you at the interrogation center?
No, they didn't no roughness or anything, but they did put us in solitary confinement for about 24 hours. Each one of us in an individual place, and then we talked to some. I think he was a German major, one man at a time. But I remember I walked in that room, and there was a map up there with a line from England over to Germany and back. And I swore that was the same line that we looked at the day before. You know, they knew how to keep track of where we were. But then I think we stayed there for a couple of days.
What type of questions did the major ask you?
You know, well, how many people what outfit you was in and all that stuff. And hell, I didn't know nothing. I'm just a dumbass gunner. I wasn't involved in planning missions or outcome of the war or nothing. I just went along for the ride. But they separated the enlisted and the officers. So they put us on a train, and we were to go up this other, like a reception center in our army, you know. That's where they funneled them out, the prisoners. But we stopped in a railroad yard, marshalling yard, and the sirens were going off. And you could see contrails up in the air.
And you know that's what they bombed.
And you know,
right?
we knew we'd bombed a few marshalling yards ourselves, and we knew that was the target. So the Germans locked the doors and vacated the area.
And you were in this boxcar?
But we were in it was in the coach inn. But they got out, you know, they took cover, and here we are sitting in the middle. But they was bombing one over someplace. They didn't bomb this one. And then we went some more, and we had to walk up to this camp that they had, and here's all these GI prisoners, you know, against the fence. And I bet you I heard 3 or 4 of them say, "Hi, Charlie, how you doing?" See, they was guys from the barracks I was in Dalhart. But we stayed there a couple of days.
When you say we, did the other enlistment men from your airplane stay together?
Yeah, we all stayed together.
Okay.
5 of us stayed together, 6 of us, whatever it was. And they took us down to another temporary camp. We were just in warehouses for about a week. And then they put us on boxcars. And they were 40 and 8, you know, 40 horses or 8 men. And they had barbed wire, you know, like you open the doors, okay, they had barbed wire from front across there. And I think there was 8 German guards in there.
In the boxcar with you?
In the boxcar in the middle, roped off from the rest of us. Was 28 American prisoners over there and 28 on the other side. So we had 56 prisoners and 8 guards in the thing that supposed to hold 40 men. And we rode this all the way across Germany. We were near the French border when we left there, and we went. I understand we went through Berlin at night, but that was hairy in itself because them fighters were over there now, but they shoot up a moving train and nothing flat. But they took us up. We was where we were in the POW camp was actually Poland, but the Germans had taken it over. and they had four compounds, 4 separated, fenced in with 10 barracks in each one. And when we got there, the one wasn't finished, so we ended up sleeping on the ground in tents for a couple of weeks till they finished the other one. And they were A, B, C, and D, and we were in C logger. And it was 10 barracks, 10 rooms, and 20 or 25 to a room. So the one D logger had some British airmen in there, but the rest of them were all Americans.
How was the food in the camp?
We got Red Cross parcels, but I forget what a Red Cross parcel used to be good for, but we got a fourth of a Red Cross parcel. Like, we get a piece of Velveeta cheese in them little quarter-pound boxes, so 4 people shared that. And they had powdered milk, and cigarettes, soap. But we got there in September. And the 6th of February of 1945, the Russians were advancing from one direction and the Allies from the other direction. So they moved us out on the 6th of February. And not, in groups of probably 400 or 500. And we marched all over Germany from there and until 26th of April. We were liberated by the American 104th Infantry Division.
When you were liberated, well, let me ask you another question. Anybody try to escape the prison while you were there?
Not really, because you see the movies and all that, but I remember I didn't see it, but this one guy, he lost it, and he tried to climb the fence, and they kept telling him to stop, and he didn't stop, so they shot him and killed him. But I never saw that. I just heard the story. Well, only one time I thought about it, and that wasn't escaping. We were in this one place for a couple of days, and they said they were going to move us out at 4 o'clock in the evening.
And this is when you're marching around Germany.
Yeah, and they said if anybody didn't feel up to it, they could go on sick call. So our radio operator, who was from Maine, I don't remember what his name was, but he decided that he couldn't make it. So he went on sick call. Well, me and Dale stayed together. 3 of us was together all the time up to that, and then him and I. But we started walking to Jesus. I mean, it was dark, and it was getting close to midnight. We've been walking for 8 hours, and man, I was getting pooped. And I said, if we go in one more little town and we don't stop, when we get out of town, I'm going to fall out, and I'm going over and just lay down on the damn ground and go to sleep. I ain't going no further. But we did stop at this one place. And we were there a couple days. And the fellow from Florida and I were sleeping. There was another guy with us. I don't know where we picked him up, but we were sleeping between 2 rows of cross ties. And one of the prisoners come over and woke us up in the morning, and he said, we're being liberated today. And we said, get out of here. We don't want to hear all them rumors. He pulled a pack of K rations out of his pocket. And we didn't never, they were, you've heard of them, man. You fit in your pocket, Will. He showed us a pack. We said, where'd you get these? And he said, some American GI came across the river. We was right on the river. And he snuck in there and give them some K rations. And so the next day at noon, the Germans said fall out. So we fell out to Central Place, and I looked up here and up there, and there was a major.
A German major?
No, he was American. He had a big steel helmet on and a 45 on his hip, and he was giving orders to everybody.
To our guys.
To the Germans and our guys, mostly the Germans. And that's the best looking man I ever seen in my life. So they marched, the Germans marched us down to the river, and then they laid down all their weapons, and they were the prisoners and we were loose.
Was there any animosity toward the guards in your groups?
Not really. To be truthful, some of this is no lie, some of those guards that was guarding us, they was as old as I am now. Hell, they couldn't hardly hear it. And they had a pack a mule couldn't carry. Well, I know one time I seen one of the prisoners take a rifle from a guy, a German guard, and carry it for him. He just thought he couldn't go anymore. But those guards were really old people that they took into service, you know. And there was one guy. I thought if I ever met him, I'd kick him in the shins or something. But they took notes of all the people that we figured treated us badly, and it mentions that in that book there. But when we were liberated, they took us into. We called it Halle. It was Halle, but it's called Howe.
Was that nearby?
Yeah, it wasn't too far away. It was located not too far from Leipzig. Leipzig was a major city, but there was a college there, and they took us and they bivouacked in the dormitories. But there was displaced persons, prisoners of war, you know, Russians, French, and everything, you know. And we stayed, I think we stayed there maybe one night, but they had American infantry outfit at the airfield. That was the German airfield. And some guy told us that they got mess halls all over American mess halls all over the place. Said you can just go in there and you sweet talk a mess sergeant and you'll get some chow. So me and the fellow from Florida, we hitchhiked in and we got from town into the base, and we went to mess hall and we give that mess sergeant a sorry story, you know, had the tears in his eyes. And on the way back, hitchhiking back to town, this second lieutenant picked us up in a Jeep. He said, "Where are you going?" We said, "We're going back to town." Said, we just was liberated as prisoners of war. He said, "Well, I'll take you to my outfit." I had on an RAF outfit. Some guys wore American clothes and some by RAF. But they give me a blue pants and a blue coat and all this stuff. But anyway, there was a political prison right next to the house where the lieutenant was, and these guys were MPs, and they were guarding these political prisoners. So he said, we'll take you with me, and we'll get you some GI clothes, and we'll give you a meal. And so we went in there, and he said, "You guys can go up and they had confiscated this German house." So he said, "You guys go up and get a bath, and we'll get some clothes, and you know, we'll fix you all up." Well, I went in there, I took a bath, and I got out of the tub, and I looked over there, and I saw a guy standing there. And I looked at that, I looked, and I said, "I don't know who you are, but you're about the skinniest dude I ever laid eyes on. And it finally dawned on me, there wasn't nobody standing there, I was looking in the mirror.
You had lost a lot of weight.
I lost a hell of a lot of weight. And I was skinny as a rake. But they got me some khakis and GI uniforms. We put them on and went downstairs and had a terrific meal. And the guy, one of them MPs had a box that big and that wide, shifting, loaded up the ship's guns and swords and everything back to the States. And he gave me a little German Army dress sword, just like a dagger. And I brought that home with me. And I give it to a friend of mine up at Kaiser. But then we moved over to the air base, and we were there about a week or two, and then they airlifted us back to Reims, France. And then from Reims we went on a train up to Camp Lucky Strike. And we...
Did you, while you were still a prisoner, did they make you do any work?
No, it's not allowed.
Did you see any Jewish prisoners at work?
No, but we've seen Russians emptying the latrines in Stalag Luft 4. But the Air Force was smart. According to the Geneva Convention, you can't work officers nor NCOs. According to that, and the Germans went by it. Every airplane in the United States Army Air Force, when they left the ground, everybody on there was either an NCO or a commissioned officer. So when they hit the ground, we just walked around the compound and played poker for cigarettes, and we never anybody had to work.
How long were you at Camp Lucky Strike before you headed home?
I think about 3 weeks.
And how did you get home?
They put us on a ship. It was one of the, what the hell they call them?
A Liberty ship?
A Liberty ship, yeah. And they double loaded it. If it held 1,000 people, which it did, whatever amount they had, they put double on there, and half slept in the daytime and half slept in the night. And I was unlucky. I'm a day people, and I was left to get the bed in the daytime. But it took us 11 days to come across and we landed at Newport News, and there was a camp down there. I can't remember.
Patrick Henry.
Right near Newport News. And then they took us on a train from there up to Fort Meade.
And that's where you got discharged?
No. The war was still going on. We come back from overseas, and we landed 18th of June, 1945. And the war wasn't over yet. Matter of fact, there was some thought of loading us up and taking us to South Pacific.
But they didn't send you over.
Well, when we hit Meade, they give us a 60-day leave, and I came home to Maryland, and then at the end of 60 days, we reported to Miami Beach. We had a week on the beach. And people were married could take their wives. I wasn't married, but married people got to take their wives down there and have a week on the beach. And then after we got the week done, then they started they paid us up to date. And then they started to send us going places to till your 60 days, well, your leave was up, but till your discharge time come up on they had when the war was open, they had a counting system. You got so many points.
Yeah.
And then I had 75. But as a prisoner of war, you could check where choose where you want to go. Well, I want to go to bowling, but they said there wasn't no openings. So there was 3 of us came back from Germany together, but they weren't on my crew or anything, because they put you where, like if you was from Maryland, you went to this place, but we all 3 of us ended up in Langley Field, and so when I got there, they said, "You know how to type?" I said, "No." Said, "You know how to file papers?" I said, "No." He said, "You know how to drive a truck?" I said, "No." He said, "You want to be an MP?" I said, "No." He said, "You want to be a cook?" I said, "Hell no." So he said, "You can't do nothing, and we don't need no gunners, the war's over. You ain't gonna get to shoot at anybody." He said, "You either want to be a cook or you're going to be a MP." Well, I said, "I'll take the MP." So they signed me as an MP, and I had 3 days of training, and I fired a .45 revolver about from far here to that wall, which is probably 10 feet. I couldn't hit the bank, but after my 3 days training, I checked in with the sergeant in the military police, and it was Wednesday. I said, "Sarge, it's no use me starting in the middle of work." I said, "How about I go home for 3 or 4 days and start fresh on Monday morning?" He said, "We can't do that." I said, "Why not?" He said, "We need you." I said, "What did you do without me till I got here now?" He said, "You're going to go to work tomorrow." So I went downstairs, and one of the other guys was waiting, that he went there with me, and he didn't like it there either. And he said, "I heard a rumor that if we're prisoners of war, we can go any place we want to." I said, "Come on." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "We're going to base headquarters, check us out." So we went up personnel, and the guy said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "If you're a prisoner of war, can you go anywhere you want to?" He said, "You guys prisoner of war?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's true." He said, "Where do you want to go?" And we said, "We want to go to Wilmington, Delaware." And a week later, we was on a train to Wilmington, Delaware. So we get up there, and the guy looked at my record, and he said, "Oh, I see you're an MP." He said, "We need you." I said, "You don't need me." He said, "Yeah, you're going to have to be an MP." I said, "You're wasting your time and mine." I said, "You put me in MP, I'm going to be somewhere else in a couple of days." And he said, "How can you say that?" Well, I don't know why, but they had an R stamped on my record instead of E for Europe. And I said, "Do you see that R there?" He said, "Yeah, what's that mean?" I said, "That means I ain't going to be no MP." So he called his sergeant over and asked him what it was. I said, "I can move, and the sergeant said, "That's right. He can get a transfer any place he wants to go." So they put me in a supply, giving out blankets to guys who were coming through there to get discharged. And then I finally they were closing the place down, and they sent me down to the Winchester Army Airfield, which is now the airport. And that's where I got discharged.
We have about 5 minutes left on our interview today. I know that you were out of the military for about a year, but then you came back. Why did you come back?
I think I like the Air Force. And when I come back, I chose my base of choice, and I went to Tampa, Florida for 3 years. And then I got discharged, and I re-enlisted at Bowling Air Force Base in 49. In 51, I left for Hawaii. And we were I had to go from Bowling to Tinkerfield, Oklahoma, and from there to Hawaii, and from Hawaii down to Marshall Islands on I went to 2 nuclear weapons tests, one in 51 and one in 52. Well, my discharge was up in 53, so we came home. We left Hawaii, and I got married in the meantime, and Helen and I left there in January of 53, and I got discharged in March of 53, and I was going to re-enlist at Bowling in the same outfit that I left from. And I run into a guy who was in that outfit, but he said, come down and why don't you get in my outfit? So I went over and talked to them about re-enlisting, and their headquarters was over at National Airport. And they said, go over and see this captain over there. So I went over to National and told the guy, what my qualifications were and everything. He said, yeah, we can use you. I said, do I re-enlist at Bowling? He said, no, they'll keep you. He said, go to the south coast at Fort Myer, which was actually on the cemetery. Well, I re-enlisted, and I went to National, and then I was from south over there to National, and National over to Bowling. And it turned out I enlisted in the presidential outfit. And we had a squadron of airplanes and headquarters at National Airport, and a squadron of Bowling. And I ended up in the Bowling portion of it. And that was 53. In 61, we moved to Andrews Air Force Base. In 68, they finally caught up with me. And First Sergeant called me and he said, I got an assignment for you. I said, where? He said, Sonderstrom, Greenland. I said, you're kidding. He said, no. So I left there and went to Sonderstrom. I had to go through Alaska to go to Sonderstrom. And I stayed there a year. And then from there I come back to Wordsmith Air Force Base in Michigan. And I stayed there a year, and I got assigned to Vietnam. And I stayed at Vietnam 8 months, and the last 4 in Thailand. Then I come back to Andrews on a terminal assignment, and I stayed. I got back in April of 72, I think, and I got discharged in 74.
We have about 1 minute left. Did the military teach you anything?
Teach me anything? Well, it taught me to be an airplane mechanic. And that's what I did for a year or so when I got out of service. But I liked the military. I mean, I didn't have no... Matter of fact, I wouldn't have got out at 30. But that was... You got out of 30-year service. And in the Air Force, the only ones could stay for 30 years was Chief Master Sergeants. Because when I come back there, I was due to be discharged, and they said you can't discharge, you can't be re-enlist, but you can extend your enlistment to get your 30 years in. So I did that. But hell, I'd have stayed another 3 or 4 years if they'd let me. I like the Air Force.
Thank you for your interview today, Mr. Brown. And you can consider yourself a role model for all my students.
Well, my wife says I talk too much. This is off now, right?
No, not yet.